Writing. Many people will argue that writing is the most important aspect of making movies. I consider it like the foundation of a building. If your writing is strong, it can help carry the rest of your film. If it's not, then nothing can really save it. And I'm sure that's not an original analogy, but it's the first thing that came to mind. I'll be the first to say that I'm not the best writer out there, but I do try to put a lot of thought into it. In this section, I'm going to cover the methods I use when writing a script. What I say here may not apply to everyone. I tried to avoid getting too specific because your objectives for writing change depending on your genre and your idea. For example, in drama, it can be important to focus on subtle emotional reactions of your characters, whereas in an action movie, making scenes exciting is more important. And if you're doing something like a music video, you don't even have to worry about things like plot or dialogue. So I'm just going to focus on some tips I think are hard to go wrong with. And I hate to say this, but Galaxy Gulp probably isn't the best example of writing simply because of its format. Galaxy Gulp is primarily a series of skits, some of which overlap into each other. The setting was so surreal in the first place that we didn't really have to worry about the context of anything like you would with a normal script. There's nothing wrong with this, but if I'm going to give tips on writing, I should talk about more than just what's seen in Galaxy Gulp. The first thing I do when writing a script is to focus on the ideas I know I want to have. In comedy, these would usually be your jokes or events that are funny and you want to make sure are part of your video. If you were making a mystery movie, this would be the mystery premise itself. And by an idea, that can be anything. It can be the plot of your movie, a single scene, or even a dialogue sequence, or just a line you really want. Once you've identified the individual elements you really want in your movie, the next step is to figure out how to connect them. For example, we have a dragon in Galaxy Gulp. Say you wanted to write a story where a knight goes off to fight a dragon. That would be an idea to build off of. So we have a knight fighting a dragon. How does he get there? Is it going to be a long journey, or does it start right before the fight? Why is he fighting this dragon? Did it kidnap a princess? Is it terrorizing villagers? How's it going to end? Does he slay the dragon and come back victorious? Do they kill each other? These are the kinds of questions you should be asking yourself once you have an idea that you want to use. In my mind, scriptwriting is like connecting the dots between different concepts and ideas. This practice of connecting the dots can apply to almost all of your script. It doesn't have to be just the main plot elements. When I was writing Galaxy Gulp, one of the main jokes I thought of was the Combine soldier trying to drink a soda. However, I didn't want the audience to see the joke coming, so I had to have something to distract the viewer so the cup joke would be more unexpected. That's where the whole stocks conversation came in. I was trying to think of what they could be talking about that would distract the viewer but still be entertaining. In the game, the Combine are these cold and ruthless soldiers, so I thought it would be funny to have them stand around acting like they belonged on Wall Street. This brings me to my next point in script writing, which is to have a purpose for every scene. If you can't explain why you have a scene in your movie, then it doesn't belong there. Now, this doesn't mean every scene has to advance the plot or make a point. You can have a whole variety of reasons for a scene. Maybe you want to show off the atmosphere of the area you're filming in. That's a reason right there. Some other reasons are to build suspense, establish characters, add comic relief, or even just to show the audience how a character got from one location to another. For example, in Galaxy Gulp, the scene with the dwarf and the turbochi walking away has a function. It's to show what's happening to those characters and to give the audience a second or two to wonder if the dwarf is really going to shoot himself out of the cannon or not. If I had cut directly from him saying duty calls to the cannon firing, the transition would be much more abrupt and maybe more confusing overall. Now, this doesn't mean everyone has to agree with why you have your scene, just that you should be able to defend it. And a big part of that is trimming down your script to just the bare necessities. Again, I thought I needed a transition for the dwarf being shot out of the cannon, but that only took about 10 seconds or so. If I'd spent 2 minutes showing that, that would have been bad because there's no reason for it to be that long. You don't have to worry about trimming things down the first time you write your script out, but definitely go over it before you start filming. And this doesn't mean get rid of anything good, just make sure that it all belongs in your movie. You never hear a good director say something like, "Yeah, I added this scene in so I could bore the audience." That's what we want to avoid. Now, besides having a purpose for all your scenes, I'd like to add a few more comments about characters and dialogue. I was actually reluctant about adding this because these aren't steadfast rules so much as observations and personal preferences on my part. So it's not to say your script has to be this way, just that you might be less likely to go wrong if you follow some of these guidelines. Okay, first, unless you're doing an outright spoof, I recommend having believable characters. And by this, I mean write dialogue that sounds like something a real person would say. It doesn't matter if you're writing fantasy, science fiction, mystery drama, anything. You can have any sort of setting, but as long as your characters act like they belong in it, you should be alright. So you can have a fantastic environment, but if your characters are someone the viewer can relate to, it helps increase audience immersion. This really shouldn't hamper your writing much. There are all kinds of personalities. And really, the more people you meet, the better you can determine what's believable and what's not. So an aristocratic baron is not going to use lots of crude language. A Navy SEAL is not going to be a timid and oversensitive person. There are lots of little things like that. Now, this doesn't mean you should necessarily follow stereotypes, just that if you have an idea of what's believable behavior for your character, it can help your whole production. And here's another tip I recommend. This may sound obvious, but you'd be surprised. Try not to make your characters obnoxious or annoying. And by that, I don't mean characters that annoy other characters. I mean characters that annoy your audience. This isn't to say annoying people are unbelievable. On the contrary. But do you really want to watch a movie about them? If you have an intentionally annoying character in your script, you're playing with fire. Unless you know exactly what you're doing, odds are that character is going to make people not want to watch your movie. Now, they're not completely taboo. For instance, a common theme in horror movies is to always have the annoying guy get killed. And that works because everyone wants to see that guy die. But if you have a character like that, you better limit his screen time to the bare minimum. Otherwise, he'll just suck the life out of your movie. If your character is saying stuff like, "Doi," then you might want to re-examine your whole script. Now, what's annoying to me, other people might like, so you can't please everyone. But just make sure that everything you're writing down for your characters is what you really want. Now let's talk some about dialogue. You can do what you want, but if you want to be considered a good writer, you'll avoid cliches. Cliches are phrases or situations that have been used to death. They're not clever, they're not entertaining, and they're often not even things real people would do or say. They're simply signs that the writer can't think of anything better to write, and I hate them. If you're not clear about cliches, I made a list of a few of them you've probably heard before. I'll start off. I've got a bad feeling about this. How many times has that been said in a game or movie? The answer? A lot. Here's another. I know this sounds crazy, but you have to believe me. That line right there should be a warning sign that your whole plot line might be contrived. Okay, here's one that's used as a taunt when characters are fighting. Is that your best? Or, is that all that you've got? Or, are you even trying? If your character says that, he's being cocky, unoriginal, and it makes no one like him, especially the audience. And here's one for a villain. Did you really think that you could defeat me? Lines like that are so uninspired. They're awful, and there are hundreds of these. Don't fall into this trap with your own work. Try to write something clever or interesting. Even if writing isn't the main point, and you just want an action sequence. If you do have dialogue, at least try and make sure it's not painful to listen to. It will only help your movie, regardless of how good your action is. Remember, if there's anything you don't like about your script, your audience will be even more unforgiving. Be prepared to go over and revise your script several times. So far, I've never written a script that I haven't changed in some way later. You may find some lines don't flow very well, or part of the plot doesn't seem plausible, or you may come up with better ideas to put in your script days after writing the first version. This happens to me all the time. In the case of Galaxy Gulp, I was working with Noesis to write the script, and they came up with a lot of ideas after the first draft. For instance, the samurai slap fighting wasn't in the original script, but they were willing to animate it, and now it's one of the funniest parts in the movie. So you won't necessarily have to, but be prepared to change your script if you find something's not working. Alright, now the last thing I want to cover about script writing is be aware of who you're writing it for. One thing that's easy to forget is that writing isn't just dialogue. It's every action and detail in your script that you plan out. So if in your script a character trips over a rock and knocks himself unconscious, that's writing. Now you're going to want to write out all of your dialogue just so you can remember it and so your voice actors have something to read off of. Beyond that, it sort of depends on your situation. Odds are you're going to be doing most, if not all of the work in making your own machinima. If that's the case, as long as you can visualize what you're trying to create, specifying every little detail in the script isn't necessary. However, if you want other people to review your script, it doesn't hurt to add extra notes to the dialogue. So for voice actors, you may want to indicate whether the character is afraid, calm, inquisitive, whatever tone you're shooting for. If you're working with a group of people who are going to help you animate the movie, then it's a good idea to make a lot of notes. So you can make notes about how a character raises his hand at a certain time or looks at a certain person. Now there is a standard format for movie scripts, but honestly I forget the exact rules of it. Really, it's kind of irrelevant because you're the boss. It's your movie. It's not like you're going to be submitting this to a Hollywood executive. It's just for your benefit and your actors or anyone else who's helping you. And ironically enough, I've actually lost the original script of Galaxy Hope. But I was able to find a page of it. So I wanted to show you briefly what a script might look like.